Therefore, instead of thinking cutting government spending by $1 trillion is a detriment, it's a blessing, it's a help. It will be spent, the money would be spent more wisely. And the allocation of credit would be the same thing. Today, the Federal Reserve does everything to say that they will allocate credit to their friends in the bubble formation and to their friends when the bubble bursts and they need their bailout. At the same time, individuals, middle-class people, people who don't want to speculate in the stock market and they want to assume responsibility and save money. So what do? They put their money in a CD. And Bernanke literally laughs at people and says, well, the fact that they only get 1 or 2%, that's unfortunate, but we have to take care of those who are going to stimulate the economy and give the money to the bankers. So what we need, the allocation of credit should come from the marketplace, and the people should be encouraged to save, but there's no encouragement today. What do? They take money and say we're going to take care of the elderly when they retire and we're going to have Social Security benefits. At the same time, they're wishing for, and they deliberately debase the currency, which is a moral and economic issue. So the people receiving benefits right now, are they keeping up with the cost of living? No, they're losing. But if you ask Bernanke and crew over there, they say, oh no, inflation is only 1 or 2%, don't worry about it. But what if your inflation is 6 or 8%? Somebody's stealing from you. It's theft. The founders called it counterfeiting. But because the government is too big, we have to ask a couple of questions. We have to ask, once again, what should the role of government be? Should it be to operate in an entitlement system? A lot of people in this country have come to believe that entitlements is equivalent to having a right, and we should sort that all out. You have a right to your life in a natural way. You don't get your life or your liberties from the government. You get them in a natural way. And we should say that the entitlement system is not a moral right. Entitlement means the government's going to give you something for free. Oh, the government can give you free education, free food, free housing, free medical care. Where does the government get it? They've never produced a thing. The only thing the government can do is steal it from productive individuals and give it to another one. It's totally destructive. Where we have a right to our own life and should have the right to the products of our labor, you don't have a right to your neighbor's wealth. You can't go in and steal from your neighbor just because they have more than you do. But you shouldn't have the right to send a politician or a congressman to go into your neighbor's house and take what they have because you want it. It's not right, it's not fair, and it doesn't work. But if we want to give those who want the redistribution of wealth, the benefit of the doubt, many of them are well motivated. They really care about the poor, and they don't understand economics. They don't understand how government destroys the production of wealth. So they really want to help people. And take, for instance, the housing. Well, it's nice. Everybody should have a house, even if they can't afford it. So they devise this system, print a lot of money, pass out the money, and have affirmative action programs. You force banks to give loans to people who don't qualify, and then you give special benefits to organizations like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, where their executives make hundreds of millions of dollars, and then everybody will get a house. And the number of people who had houses actually went up. But also, there were a lot of people making a lot of money on this. The people who were churning the credit, the people in the mortgage markets, the people in the building trades, the people that got into the derivatives business, and they were doing great. And the houses kept going up in prices. It sounded like a perpetual money machine. And how could it ever go wrong? The people could keep borrowing against these rising prices, except for one thing. Austrian free market economics knew exactly what was going on. They understood it clearly and said, it will not last. This is an artificial bubble created by the Federal Reserve and the U.S. Congress, and it would collapse, and it did. A characteristic of systematic debasement of a currency if that's all you were dealing with is just debasement of a currency and devaluations, the middle class suffers, the wealthy benefits because there's a transfer of wealth. The people in the middle class get to use the money last, and that's when it has less value, and prices go up and they pay the inflation tax. But the people who get the money first, the government, the politicians who get to use it, big business and big banks, and the military-industrial complex, they get to use the money first, so they have an advantage. But what happens when the bubble collapses? Because they are so in charge, because the special interests have so much charge of the monetary system and the system of our foreign policy, they will yell and scream and they say, there's a depression coming, there's a depression coming, we need bailout, if you don't do this, we'll have a depression. And they were right about one thing. There would have been a depression for the rich people, they would have gone bankrupt, but instead, they got the bailouts and we got the bankruptcy. So the middle class bore the burden of assuming the debt, and the big banks got bailed out. But it's still in process. They still want to do this. The only limiting factor right now is the fact that there's going to be an economic limit to how many dollars can be printed. We did in the bailout, the Congress appropriated $1 trillion. That's getting to be a fair sum of money. But the Fed was involved with $15 or $16 trillion of churning credit and bailing out their friends, domestic and international governments and banks. And they're still in a position to do this, and they're behind the scenes promising Europe, well, we'll be there, the dollar will take care of it. The dollar's and our credit's been devalued once already, it's getting ready to be devalued again. And people are starting to wake up and they said, you can't keep printing money and spending money and run up debt and think you can bail out the world. No more than we can be the policeman of the world, we can't be the financial caretaker of the world either. So we have to be prepared for what's happening, and fortunately, the people in this country are stirring, and this election is changing a tone. It's the first time in a 100-year history of the Federal Reserve that the Federal Reserve has become an issue in this campaign. But if we reject the notion of the failed policy of the entitlement welfare state, which we're in the midst and people are realizing it's failing, even those on the receiving end are getting pretty worried too, because they know this can't continue. But we also have to ask our question about the foreign policy. The Constitution is rather clear. The President is the Commander-in-Chief, and we should have a strong national defense. We should defend our country. We should have, a protection of national security, and that is a precise function that we should have. But that is one area where we don't have to worry very much right now, because we have the strongest military in the history of the world. There's no power in the world, even if they all got together, we are so powerful because we have more weaponry than everybody else put together. So we are not going to be attacked. Nobody's on the verge of invading us. And yet, what are we doing? We have distorted things by distorting our defense, because not only do we allow our presidents to go to war, we're allowing our presidents to go to war under NATO and UN resolutions. That's wrong. But what we have to do is decide that how much engagement we should have around the world. I think we should have plenty. It should be engagement with trade and friendship and travel and expressing of ideas. I always find it interesting that those who will challenge our views on non-intervention in foreign policy will say, oh, you guys are a bunch of isolationists. Actually, it's the opposite of isolation. We don't want to build fences and borders and tariffs and all this. They usually are the ones who want to put on the sanctions and the tariffs, and then they call us the isolationists. Matter of fact, I don't know if you've listened to the debates, I've been very explicit about who the real isolationists are. It's the ones who are resisting our efforts to open up diplomatic relationships and trade with Cuba. That's what we need to be doing.
listening to Ron Paul as he's speaking to some of his supporters far, far away, like 1,300 miles away. He's happy today, but not necessarily because of his results that we're going to see tonight as he continues to move the race forward into another state. Maria Cardona joins our panelists who are filling us in on what to expect. So let's talk a little bit about Ron Paul in this race, because while we're not talking about him a lot, he actually, polling-wise, has been third, sometimes fourth, but early results are showing he's doing better than the polls expected.
I think that's right, and that's one of the things that I've talked about leading up to Nevada is what do we expect out of Ron Paul? And the fact is that it's easy to write him off, but we know that he has a very strong and passionate base of support. And we always knew, he talked about this, that Nevada was one of those places where he could surprise people. And I actually think that if he wins second place, obviously that is news. If he wins third place, that's also news because of the fact that he does have that level of support and that he always talked about Nevada. So I think that Ron Paul is going to continue to be an issue. We all know that he's going to go into the election. And one of the reasons I think that a lot of Republicans, libertarians, conservatives really like him is, as opposed to Mitt Romney, he is somebody who has never changed his position on anything. He is somebody who can be trusted with that core, with principles.
And I'm sure some folks at home, they're saying, okay, what's the big deal with second and third place? Remember 1988. Reverend Jackson comes in second to Michael Dukakis, goes to the convention, significant power when it comes to the platform of the Democratic Party, when it came to giving a primetime speech. Also, after 88, they changed to proportional delegation as a result of that election. And so when you come in second or third when it comes to delegates, the power comes in when you go to the convention in terms of placing your people in particular positions in the party. So it matters when it comes to the convention this summer.
But there's something else going on here as well. If Ron Paul has really made Nevada as where he was going to make a big stand, if he comes in third behind Gingrich, I think that's a problem for him. But there's another dynamic here the media has yet to pay attention to, and that is a lot of Ron Paul supporters around the country have shown up and gotten involved as delegates to go to the convention, even if supporting other candidates. And the Ron Paul campaign theory is that if they can keep Mitt Romney from getting to a majority, those delegates are only locked into the first place person on the first ballot at the Republican convention.
Trojan horse.
They could throw it for a loop. And this is an organized effort in Virginia, in Pennsylvania, in Georgia, and in other states to try to make it happen. Whether or not they can pull it off is an indicator of how well he does in these caucuses. If he can't do well in the caucuses, the odds are his other ground games and his other strategy aren't working well.
You call him an insurgent?
He doesn't look like he's surging anywhere.
Surging is not exactly the word I would use. Wolf, let's send it back to you.
Thanks, Soledad. Still ahead, there's some very, very interesting results to come for a crucial voting block for Mitt Romney.